Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. Today we're excited to have Alex Schloe joining us. We're going to be talking about residential assisted living, which is a really interesting niche in real estate investing. So we have a lot of community members who are interested in serving that patient population. And also, it's not only a great way to make money, but also serve a really unmet need, increasingly so over time. There's going to be so many baby boomers who are going to need these homes. And so this is such an important topic. And so we're really excited to have Alex joining us. Hey, Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of you guys. Was honored to have you on my podcast and so great to be on yours as well. I've been listening for a long time. So it's been really, really cool to see your guys' journey and really excited to be on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. So you've been on your own journey, building a business, really getting into assisted living. Can you talk a little bit about your physician journey and then how you got to the point you are today as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would love to. So yeah, got into family medicine. So always wanted to be a physician. My mom actually was pretty sick when we were growing up, but she worked at a family practice office, and I knew that I really wanted to have that relationship with the community and kind of be jack of all trades, master of none, and take care of everyone. And our town family med physician, she was always at baseball games and sporting events and took care of my mom and dad and me and my brother, my grandparents. And so it was just really cool to see that personal relationship that you can have in family medicine. So I always wanted to be a doctor, always wanted to be a family med doc. Went to med school at the Medical College of Virginia, now VCU School of Medicine in Richmond, Virginia, and then was part of the HBSB program through the Air Force, through the Health Promotion Scholarship Program. So I was really fortunate to graduate from medical school debt-free. In fact, was able to pay off my undergrad loans with the little Air Force stipend that I got while in med school. And then I went to Eglin Air Force Base and did my family medicine residency near Destin, Florida. Did a lot of fishing, which Kenji and I were talking about before we started the podcast there. And then was stationed in Colorado Springs at Schriever Space Force Base now, and just separated from the Air Force June 29th. And so now really fortunate that real estate and entrepreneurship has given me the freedom to practice medicine and live life how I want to. And so now practicing 2 days per week with a direct primary care clinic, loving every second of it. The other days of the week, hanging out with the family and building up our real estate businesses as well.
Yes. And so I really want to highlight something before we dig deep into the real estate part of this is you were building this business and doing all of these things that you did with real estate and with residential assisted living, while you were still working full time. And so how did you manage that? Because I think that's a lot. I'm sure we're going to hear from you that was a lot for you. And what kind of advice would you give to somebody who, is a full-time doc and is like, hey, I want to also be an entrepreneur? What have you learned through your journey about that balance?
Yeah, I think it's tough. A balance itself is just such a hard thing. I think we all feel that as physicians and especially as parents and husbands and wives. And so it's a difficult thing for me. I always wanted to make sure I was putting my family first. So that made the balance a little bit harder. I would get home, I'd put my phone away, play with the kids, hang out with my wife. And then it was after the kids went to bed, after I was able to connect with my wife, then it was time to work on the business, which didn't leave much time before I had to wake up early and get back to work in the morning. And so I just learned initially and early on that I had to be efficient with my time. And I also realized really early on too that I needed to educate myself. I didn't get any education in medical school about real estate or entrepreneurship or anything like that. And so I'm thankful for you guys and thankful for White Coat Investor and Bigger Pockets and some of these early resources that I was able to take advantage of and really educate myself to see like, hey, there's another way to do this. And I can sacrifice now while I'm working full-time active duty to then create some freedom down the road and be able to practice medicine how I wanted to once I got out of the Air Force. And so was really fortunate that was the case, but it hasn't been an easy journey, and it's been a lot of late nights and weekends, but it's been worth it for sure, especially now on the back end to be able to have that extra time with the family. Really grateful for that.
Yeah, it reminds me of when we were, both working more than full time and doing business on the side. And then we added real estate. It was like, okay, this is the short term for the long term gain, right? And that was exactly how we were thinking about it. And it wasn't always easy. And we did a lot of work-life integration, which I'm sure you did too, where you're involving your family in that work. At least for us, we were always bringing our kids to tour properties or do things like that. And I don't know how much you did that. But I think that people have this idea that it's something that happens immediately. There's instantaneous success in it, and it doesn't have to be challenging. There is work behind this, and you ultimately have to prioritize, which sounds like you really prioritize your family, but then you're prioritizing your business and growing your business above other things in your life, probably not watching TV, not having a whole lot of leisure activities, not having a whole lot of hobbies, but you do that for the short term, for that long-term gain of the life you're gaining.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's exactly right. We were just talking about it, my wife and I, about TV. I used to love watching movies, and I think maybe I watched like 2 or 3 movies that weren't Disney movies with our 4-year-old, or an animated movie with our 4-year-old, all last year. And the only TV we really watched was like Bluey. And other than that, we haven't watched really any TV. I do love to read. I've learned a ton by reading and just love to read all the time. So that's always been kind of a mainstay. But yeah, you just have to prioritize what really matters. And then you can be surprised to figure out how much time you actually have once you really sit back and look and do like a time audit and see, man, I was wasting, a couple hours here watching TV and this time scrolling on Instagram or whatever it may be. You may be surprised to see that although we're really busy as physicians and as parents and spouses, that you have more time than you think if you really buckle down and prioritize and get that done. And so that's been really helpful as well. And then you learn early on too, man, you have to get help, right? Like with my podcast and some other things, like I just had to get some help and hire a VA and someone else who could help take the load off of me so that I could do the things that I really loved in the business. And then I have 2 amazing partners as well, Charlie and Luke. And so that was helpful too. But there's a lot of ways to kind of buy back your time, if you will, and figure out like, hey, we have a little bit more time than we think we do.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about then this real estate journey and this entrepreneurship journey. How did it start and how did it change over time? Like, were there a lot of pivots or did you right away know exactly what you wanted to do?
Oh man, I wish I knew right away. There's plenty of pivots and a lot of shiny object syndrome, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And for folks who are wondering, kind of my thoughts on shiny object syndrome in terms of all the different asset classes and the different way to generate passive income, or passive income, if you will, in quotations, is that I look at it like going to an ice cream shop and you have all the different flavors there. And you're like, man, I want to figure out what type of ice cream I want. Let me try a couple different samples. And then once you figure out what you really like, that's the ice cream to stick with, if you will. And so for me, that's assisted living. But I definitely had a lot of samples along the way. So we got started. I bought a home in Florida with a physician loan, no money down, $58 out of pocket before I started residency. I wanted to do a house hack. I wanted to buy a small multifamily property with the VA loan, but there weren't any in the area. So we did like a live-in flip light. It was $58 out of pocket because it didn't cover some title fee. And I remember being terrified about spending $58. We grew up in a home that didn't have a lot of money. And so I've always been and still am frugal and cheap. And it's something I'm working on, going from that scarcity mindset to more of an abundance mindset. But yeah, bought that. That was the initial start. And then met my partner, Charlie, who we're still partners to this day. And we bought some short-term rentals. And then we, over time, pivoted to residential assisted living. So we have 5 in Arizona that we lease out to operators, and we can talk a bit more about that. We have 3 in Wisconsin that we're partnered with an operator on, and then we're working on some new developments. So we just finished raising some capital for 2 16-bed memory care mansions, they're called, in Tomball, Texas, with one of our mastermind members. And then we're working on a development in Winchester, Virginia, and also a potential value-add opportunity for an assisted living facility in New Orleans, and then another development in Missouri. So it's been crazy, and all that's kind of happened over the last 3 months. Also was fortunate to be able to help raise some capital and be a GP in some other projects, a boutique hotel, mobile home park, and some independent living new developments too. I've been all over the place in terms of shiny object syndrome and pivots, but it's been really, really fun. And I think that the assisted living route is the way forward for us, and kind of riding that silver tsunami is the best opportunity in real estate.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit more. I mean, you mentioned silver tsunami, and that's a really great reason to get into it. But what exactly was it about assisted living that really drew you to it and really make you decide to focus on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually goes all the way back to when I was in high school. My first job was actually working at an assisted living facility, and I remember seeing how much they were paying to be in this facility. And it wasn't the nicest facility. It wasn't the worst facility, but the care that the residents received was not not great. And then, of course, we all have our stories of rotating through nursing homes and seeing those conditions that folks are living in. Same with some of the
Mhm.
assisted living facilities. But I remember, in particular, there was a former IBM executive. His name was Dick. He's long since passed. Who was one of the residents, and he was the nicest guy. I just loved getting to chat with him and hear his journey. And I was the kind of handyman slash cook slash a little bit of everything at this assisted living facility. And I remember one day Dick was like, "Hey, can you come by my room?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I came by his room and he's like, "My TV won't work." He's like, "The TV hasn't worked for like 2 weeks and I've been trying to get somebody to fix it and no one will fix it. The caregivers don't care," whatever it was. And this was one of my first days starting there. And I walked in and I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, well, have you tried changing the batteries on the remote?" And he's like, "No, no one would give me any batteries." And we just changed the batteries and then his TV worked and he was so happy. And I'm like, this is crazy that this guy's been going for 2 weeks without a TV. Something as simple as that isn't even happening. And then throughout residency was seeing the care that grandmas and grandpas were receiving. And we're like, hey, there's got to be another way. And then to continue with that, my partner, Luke, he's in a mastermind program. Luke and Charlie and I are in a mastermind called the War Room Mastermind, which is for military members. And we met there, and it's been amazing. We've been in that for about 5 or 6 years, and being a community of like-minded entrepreneurs is just a complete game changer. It's like such a way to accelerate your journey, learn from other people's mistakes, and build incredible wealth. And Luke was on the hot seat. We would do a hot seat every week, and he's like, "Guys, I'm going to buy an assisted living home." And he kind of talked through the numbers, and he's a Navy special operator and was just like, all about taking action. And comes back a month later, he bought an assisted living home, leased to operator, and he's like, "I'm going to cash flow about $3,500 per month on this home, and I don't have to do the operations." It's like, man, this sounds amazing. Let's see how things go over the next few months. It went great, and then after about 3 or 4 months, he's like, "Hey, let's buy some of these together." And so that's how we got started, and then we brought my partner Charlie in, and it's been off to the races ever since.
Now, I wanted to talk about the opportunity a little bit and try to understand that. When you compare it to something like a long-term rental or a short-term rental, I know you invested in short-term rentals. What would you say the return is? And I know there's a difference between operating the assisted living facility yourself versus hiring an operator. But let's kind of look at both scenarios. Like, what is the opportunity if you were to say operate it yourself versus bringing in an operator?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think, to kind of answer that, there's three different ways you can invest in assisted living, and we'll kind of hit the highlights of each and pros and cons. The first way you could invest would be owning the real estate, owning the operation. So that means you own the home, you also own the business, you're involved in the day-to-day care. Not the best avenue for physicians, probably, but there's plenty of ways to partner with managers or partner with and then you're getting to also have a piece of the cash flow from the business. You can cash flow anywhere from 10, 15, $20,000 per month on one of these homes. If it's more boutique, it's operated well, you're providing exceptional care, and of course that's once the home is close to full. Usually that's about 90% occupancy that we're talking about those numbers. So you're looking 10, 15, $20,000 just from one single family home, which is amazing. You can then also, if you don't feel like owning the real estate and the operations, you can own the real estate, lease that out to an operator. So then the operator's doing all the day-to-day care, and that's leased out on a commercial lease. That's going to depend on location, area, the level of care that you're providing or offering in the home in terms of what that's going to look like. But just for rough math, the median cost for residential assisted living is about $5,500 per month. And if you have 10 residents per home, like in Arizona, then you're looking at 55,000 gross in terms of income there. There's a lot of expenses, but typically the lease fees are going to be about 2 to 3x what your long-term rental rate's going to be. So we have, like, for example, we have a home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they're paying about $11,000 per month in terms of the lease fee. That's memory care. They're charging about $8,500 per resident, and there's 10 of them. We have a little bit smaller homes that are still 10 residents, but they're just doing general assisted living, and they're paying $6,500 per month for the lease fee. That was a $600,000 home, so above the 1% fee or 1% rule, if you used to follow that. And so we're cash flowing about $2,500 to $3,000 or more per month with these homes leased to operator. The last way would be just passively investing as an LP in one of these deals, which there's great opportunities there as well. Of course, the returns are going to be a little bit less from that perspective, but way less work.
Yep. Yeah. And one thing I was just thinking about when you were talking about all this, well, the cash and cash return obviously is tremendous if you're getting 2 to 3x what you would normally get as a long-term rental. But what about your legal situation? Because if you're renting it, you own the property, you have an operator in there, and something happens to one of the residents, right? How much is your legal exposure when you have an operator in there if you just own the building? And can you talk about any examples you've seen where a resident does get injured? Does the family sue both parties?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer that last question, we have not experienced that. I have not heard of that happening from a lease to operator space, which is great, and I hope it stays that way. But in terms of the legal exposure, typically how we have it set up is like our entity owns the real estate, and that's through an LLC. So that's, has some legal protection there. And then we own a holding company that owns that LLC. So we try and isolate ourselves as much as possible. And I am certainly not an attorney, but that is helpful. We cover the property insurance, so we are responsible for the physical property itself insurance. The operator is responsible for all the liability insurance, and then we're also listed on that liability policy. So if something were to happen and somehow they were going to sue, both the operator and us were covered by their insurance policy as well. So that helps to insulate any potential exposure. But yeah, I have not heard of folks being sued. I'm sure it's happened. We're just really fortunate that that hasn't happened to us and hasn't happened to anyone in our community. But definitely want to make sure you're working with an attorney and working with insurance agents to figure out, hey, how can I best limit exposure, especially as physicians? And we get this question all the time because doctors, we're a little bit more prone to being sued. And I don't even think a lot of our operators even know that I'm a doctor because we just try and keep it from that. And the residents don't know as well. And so it's just kind of another way to limit exposure in that regard.
Can you talk about insurance? If I think about insurance for a long-term rental, it's different than insurance for a short-term rental. I would imagine it's going to be different for assisted living.
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends where you're located. And gosh, I don't know about your guys' experience from an insurance perspective, but like in Florida, we still have that first house that we bought and the insurance has gone insane. It is like, yeah, I think it's like 9 times. I paid $600 the first year I lived there, and we're paying like $3,500 a year now. It's unbelievable. So we have seen some price increases just as a whole. It does take some explaining to the insurance company. So if you call an insurance company and you say, hey, I'm buying this house that's going to be an assisted living home, they immediately think about that like terrible experience in the nursing home that they had with their grandma or grandpa, and they don't understand what residential assisted living is. And for folks who don't understand that, it's typically a large home that's been renovated to take care of residents where you're helping them with activities of daily living. You're not providing really in-depth, comprehensive medical care in the home. It is not a nursing home. And so it can take some educating to the insurance agents of like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Essentially, it's a rental with multiple seniors, and they tend to understand that after some explanation. And we haven't seen crazy rates for the property. It's been pretty comparable to what it would be if you were renting out the home as a short-term rental, because there's obviously some increased liability with the short-term rental compared to a long-term. And so they've been pretty reasonable in that regard. It can take a little bit of shopping around and explanation to find a company who's familiar with it and comfortable, but it's starting to be a lot more well-known than it was when we first got started. So that can certainly help.
I was wondering, when you are setting it up with the operator, what kind of check-ins do you have with them? So I would love to talk about how you source that operator, but let's say you have the operator in place. Are you checking in with them every single month and having kind of meetings, or how much do you interact and how much time does that take you?
Yeah, it could be as much or as little as you want. And the beautiful thing about the lease to operator side of things is it's certainly way more passive than if you're owning the real estate and the operations. Pretty much the whole kind of process, and I'll answer your question about how to find them, and that'll help feed into how often we're checking in. But typically what we recommend for folks, if they're like, hey, I want to invest in assisted living, I want to lease to an operator, we always say, well, can you find a realtor in your area who specializes in senior living or assisted living? They do exist. It can be a little bit more difficult to find, but if you can find them, they already know the requirements for the state, for the locality. They typically have a good Rolodex of potential operators. They understand, how that whole process works, and know the placement agents and all these sorts of things. So they're a huge wealth of knowledge. So if you can find a realtor who specializes in assisted living or senior living, that's going to be huge. And then oftentimes they'll open up like their Rolodex of operators and you can interview them. The other way to do that, to find operators, would be in multiple Facebook groups. We have a couple really large Facebook groups. Folks are posting in there all the time where they're looking for operators. You can look at like LinkedIn and do a job posting on Indeed. And then another great way is just calling different homes in the area, almost like you used to kind of secret shop the Airbnbs back in the day to figure out what the average daily rate was going to be and what they were offering. You can do the same thing for assisted living and talk to the caregivers, because when you call, you're often talking to the caregivers anyways and kind of see, hey, are you interested in working in another home? Do you have a friend or someone else who may be interested? Are you interested in starting your own business? There's lots of ways to do that. Same with the big box facilities as well, because a lot of times if you compare the two, residential assisted living, you typically have 10, maybe 16 residents. 6 to 16 is kind of what we say. And then, big box facilities, these can be massive. And the caregivers are typically in a big box facility taking care of 20 residents per caregiver. So 1 to 20 caregiver to resident ratio. In residential assisted living, that could be 1 to 5 or 1 to 8. And so for the caregivers, it's easier work as well and more gratifying. And then, of course, for the residents, they're getting way better care. So that's another great way, too, is going to these big box facilities, talking to caregivers, calling them. Lots of different ways. And then we have pretty in-depth interviewing of the operator, because in the lease to operator model, the operator is your linchpin. It all depends on them. And we were burned in the past with a sober living home. We have not had any issues with assisted living, but we had a sober living operator that we ended up having to evict. And that's a long story, but really the important thing is you have to make sure that their heart's in the right place, see what their experience is, and then run a background check and make sure they have the financial reserves to not only operate, but also to have that runway to fill up the home. Because if it's starting vacant, it can take, roughly each month you can get 1 to 2 residents. So it can take 5-6 months before your home is full. So you need to make sure the operator has that runway to pay the lease fee, to cover the operations, to pay for their staff while they're filling up the home. So there's a lot of things that are important. The big thing is just making sure they're in the right place. They have the right heart for care and going from there.
I just wanted to highlight something you said for everybody, because I don't want people to skip over that. You are looking at the finances of the operator very, very closely to make sure that they're going to be able to, kind of meet their obligations on their side. And I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand, is anytime you partner with somebody, you have to look at their finances. And I've definitely missed that in my journey. And that's why I wanted to highlight it so much, because this is one of those most important things that if you learn this, whenever you partner with somebody, you look at their finances to make sure that they can meet the obligation. It will save you pain down the road. So I think it's an important concept for all entrepreneurs to know, even independent of what we're talking about right now.
Completely agree. Absolutely.
I wanted to follow up on what Leti was asking about with the operator. And I'm just kind of thinking about the scenario of what you had experienced, where there was a resident and all they needed was some batteries for their remote control. Right? How are you ensuring that the operator you hire is actually doing that for their residents?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It all goes back to what's their heart, what's their motivation, what's their experience. There's a lot of folks who want to get into the assisted living space on the operation side of things, and it's always a matter of, hey, they genuinely really care for the seniors and they have a great heart for caring for seniors. And a lot of times the really great operators are folks who have some sort of healthcare background, and they've unfortunately been through that experience where their grandma, grandpa, mom, or dad went into an assisted living facility and had really poor care, and so they're motivated to provide way better care, and they understand that residential assisted living is the way to do that. And so that can be really helpful. We're not, for the lease to operator side of things, we're not very involved in their care at all. And so we usually tag up with the operators about once a month to go back to Letty's question there. But in terms of really making sure that they're providing the care that you want, you have to be a little bit more involved in the operations side of things. And that's why we've decided down the road, and now we're starting that journey of pivoting into, we want to be in the ownership of the operations. We want to have some control of the operations. Not to the degree where like I'm in there taking care of residents and wiping butts or anything like that, but to the fact of like, hey, we want to partner with a management team that we can have oversight over, so that they provide the day-to-day care, but we're making sure they're providing the care that the grandmas and grandpas really deserve. So it just depends. It's really boils down to, is the operator a good fit? Are you checking in with them? Are you getting good feedback from the residents and the caregivers and so forth that they work with? But if you want to have more control, then partnering with someone who does the operations, that you also own a piece of that operations business, can be really helpful to have that oversight. Make sure it's providing excellent care as well.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, what I'm hearing is it's really you're looking for contribution people who have a strong why that really is
Yeah.
personal, ideally, and those are going to be the best operators. But there is the why, but then there's actually the execution too. And I'm guessing, like just thinking through it, if I were in this position of owning a rental property that I was going to have an operator for, I can certainly look at Google reviews. Unfortunately, that's kind of at that point where a Google review gets really, really low. It's probably pretty far down with a lot of problems having developed. And just thinking as a doctor, the doctors, oftentimes people get, I mean, as a doctor, you're always going to get sued, right? That's very likely. But, one thing that we're really taught in med school is you're less likely to get sued if, a patient likes you, right? If you interact with them, if you show that you care, all those pieces. And so I'm just thinking that also, if the operator is operating poorly, you are much more likely to get sued too as the owner of this rental property. And so it's really important for you not only to care about how they're treating their residents and how they're operating this so that you can make sure they're financially solvent long term, so you make sure that they're actually delivering great care, at a plate, because you absolutely care about that, but also for your own liability reasons. So have you ever gotten to the level where you have a little bit more oversight, where you're like saying, hey, I want to see some NPS scores, I want to see some surveys coming back from your residents about the care, and that you would ever be in a situation where you had set it up that if they weren't delivering on those kind of results, that you would actually move them out as an operator? Or have you heard of people doing that?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. We have not personally done that or had to do that. We've been really happy with the operators that we have and the feedback that we've gotten from them. I think you hit on something that's super important. It's all about relationships, right? Like everything in real estate and entrepreneurship is about relationships, and it's no different here. And if you have a really good relationship with the operator, and hey, they have a really good relationship with the residents, it's the same thing that you mentioned. I think the beautiful thing, and I don't have any stats off the top of my mind to back this up, but I would imagine that residential assisted living has way lower rates of lawsuits than these bigger facilities, because
For
it's
sure.
just more tight knit. It's a better community. They're getting way better care. The caregiver ratios are different. There are so many more activities. There's just lots of different things that make it way, way better. So we haven't come across that yet. I think as we get more into the operation side of things and controlling more and more of the oversight of that, that's a great way to do it. Is, hey, let's get these NPS surveys, let's make sure that you're really meeting those requirements. And I think you bring up a great point too, of that's where it's really important to align yourself with the operator. And so we're working on a property in New Orleans that we just put an LOI under, and we're going to partner with this is an assisted living facility. It's about 65 beds and needs some renovations, and we're going to be more on the real estate side and partner with this operator, but we're going to own the operations. And so we're giving them equity as well in the business as a whole, so that it's aligned in terms of like, hey,
Yep.
if this is operated well, if rates are able to increase, you're going to benefit from this too. And so making sure that there's an alignment amongst the operating team is really helpful as well.
Yeah, I absolutely can see that. So just thinking about a physician listening to this, or any individual listening to this who's like, oh, this is so interesting. I wonder if I'm a good fit for this. What kind of personality or what kind of motivations have you seen that work really well for somebody who's like, hey, I want to own the real estate part, not the operations part? Who does this work well with?
Yeah, I think it works really well for physicians who are still practicing, more full time. Or the other way to do that would be partnering with an operator, as I mentioned. In our mastermind, we have a lot of physicians who are in there just because of interactions with me and so forth, and we're super grateful for that, because I think physicians really realize like there's got to be a better way to provide better care for our seniors. And we didn't even hit on the supply and demand mismatch. I mean, we have 77 million baby boomers in the United States of America. 7 out of 10 of them are going to need long-term care, which is 59 million boomers. And estimates are we're about 600 to a million beds short as of right now. And if you look at the data, about 82% of residents right now in assisted living are not the baby boomers. And so it's a lot of the silent generation still. And so as more and more of these boomers age into these homes, that supply-demand mismatch and that gap is going to widen even more. Haven Senior Investments was looking at that, and they said we're about $1 trillion of investment short in assisted living of where we need to be. So the opportunity is massive. In physicians, we understand more from the care side of like, hey, there's got to be a way better way to take care of grandmas and grandpas, and we've all had those negative experiences, whether that's in the ER with, UTIs that could have been prevented and pressure ulcers and all these things that inflict on seniors, or we've been in the nursing homes in particular. And so I think there's a big desire for, hey, we can do this differently, and this is a great way to do it, but also able to be involved without having to be the one providing the care. And so for full-time physicians, or physicians who want to get started investing in assisted living, the lease to operator model is a great way. Again, it is difficult to find the right operator, and that is the most important piece. Another way to do it would be partnering with an operator so you have some more operational oversight. We're seeing that a lot as well. And so it's a really incredible opportunity now, and I think personally the best opportunity in real estate for decades to come.
Yeah, that's an incredible summary.
Now, I wanted to get back to really thinking about the profitability of this investment. And you talked about on the revenue side of things, maybe you can do 2 to 3x what you can get with a long-term renter. But I think the one thing that I don't want to miss here is that there's a considerable investment that you have to make upfront to get these properties ready. And we know this because we were about to invest in a home right down the street from where we were living in Seattle, but we didn't end up doing it. And actually, we're pretty happy because it took about a year and a half, 2 years to get the property set up, get all the permitting, all the legal, all the requirements. I remember just multiple failed inspections, going back and getting things fixed, and it was a 2-year, very, very expensive project to get to the point where you could actually get residents, right? And so again, I just wanted to highlight this for the people who are listening, and I wanted to kind of understand that part of it, because it does seem like, especially in a place like Washington where there's a lot of regulations and the permitting process is very, very slow. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that aspect of the investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we tend to tell folks, if you want to avoid that, try and find a home that was previously licensed, previously renovated. And I think to better answer the question as a whole, it's really what makes a good home for residential assisted living, because we get that question all the time of, I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot, 2-story home. I want to make it assisted living. That's not a good option for you. That's not going to work well. What you're really looking for is a large single-story home that has as many bedrooms and bathrooms as possible. And then in terms of those renovations that are often needed, you often need a fire suppression system, so a fire sprinkler system, and that can be pretty costly.
Yes.
You need widened door frames, you need a wheelchair ramp, you need grab bars in the shower, grab bar in the toilets. Really, like LVP is going to be a better option than carpet because of fall risk. But those are the big investments that are going to be needed if you're renovating a home into assisted living. I do think there's a great opportunity to do like a BRRRR RAL. So you're buying the home and you're renovating it into a assisted living home. I think there's a great opportunity there as well, but just know you're going to need some of those bigger investments. Largest one being that fire suppression system for sure. For you, that can be 10, 15, 20,000, depending on the square footage of the home.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're at the part of the episode where we ask 2 questions. We ask all of our guests, what is your definition of wealthy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's freedom. I think for physicians, it's the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want to.
Awesome.
So simple.
Yeah,
so true.
Right. Yeah. The next one is, what is one mindset, habit, or strategy that separates someone who is wealthy versus someone who is not?
I think it's the ability to take action, or the willingness to take action. I think as physicians, we really want to have all the information. We want to, have as much data as we possibly can before making a decision. And you have to realize in real estate and in entrepreneurship, you're never going to have all that. So you just have to have the willingness to take action and go from there.
Amazing. So can you tell everyone where they can find out a little bit more about what you do and get in contact with you? And of course, we'll put the link below as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, I would love to. So you can find me, Dr. Alex Schloe. You can just Google me. You can find me all over. We do have a website called therowroom.com, which is where you can learn a bit more about our mastermind, which is an incredible community to help you purchase your first or next residential assisted living home. But we have on there a free 10-step guide to purchase your first or next residential assisted living home. So if you go to therowroom.com, you can find out how to connect with me. You can find the podcast, and you can get that free guide.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex, so much for, your time today, but also for what you're doing, because obviously there's a real contribution component behind it. And I think all of us can feel your heart. And I think also what you're doing is you're ending up giving this opportunity to physicians who really, truly care about the delivery of care and have seen firsthand. I know as hospitalists, we've seen people stuck in the hospital for a year, right? Because they can't find placement. And so I think everything that you're doing is just amazing all around. And I'm grateful that you're giving this opportunity to so many physicians so that they can make a difference, not only increasing the wealth of their family, but in a real problem in this country and helping be part of solving it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for what you guys do as well. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.